Hey guys, what's going on? It's Mitch here. Welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to be answering one of the most common questions I get asked, which is, do I use autofocus or manual focus when shooting on a gimbal? So first off guys, I'm going to share a little bit of my philosophy around shooting with a gimbal when it comes to manual focus and then autofocus, kind of like a pros and cons. And then later on in the video guys, I'm going to be sharing with you 3 of my favorite shots. I'm going to be giving you tips about how you can recreate those shots. And the best thing about them is that you don't need autofocus to pull them off. They're completely manual focus. So make sure you stick around for that. So way back in 2011, I bought a Glidecam HD 2000. It was actually one of the first pieces of filmmaking equipment that I bought in the hope that it would enable me to get really smooth and beautiful looking cinematic shots. So fast forward to today and I'm still using the Glidecam HD 2000. You'll see it in this video. I've owned gimbals in the past and I will own other gimbals in the future. For now I'm just waiting for one particular gimbal to be released onto the market so I can grab that one. But for the most part, they serve the same purpose and are basically interchangeable for the purpose of this video. So way back in 2011, there were no DSLR cameras that actually even had a autofocus function in video mode, let alone one that was, reliable enough to use on a professional project. So I had to learn and experiment with this new filmmaking tool and I was very excited about it, but I was limited to only being able to do shots with manual focus. So that really forced me to learn, how to get around this limitation and how to create beautiful shots with that limitation in mind. So this might come as a little bit of a surprise, but to this day, I think more than 90% of the shots that I get on a gimbal are using manual focus. So why not use autofocus? Well, there are a couple of reasons. But I guess if you're trying to pull off a shot where your subject is going to be moving closer to the camera throughout the shot or further away, you do need to have some kind of focus puller or utilize an autofocus mode with your camera. So I've been using the AFC mode on my Fuji X-T2 and X-H1 and the dual pixel autofocus tap to focus feature on my 1DX Mark II for shots where the subject is coming closer or further away from the camera. But as I said, it's probably only 10% of the shots that I actually get with a gimbal require some kind of autofocus. But if you've ever used these autofocus modes, whether it's a Fuji camera, Canon, Sony, Panasonic, any of these cameras, you'll know that it's not always 100% accurate. And you might have a subject that's doing a performance, they might do a really good take, but it's just slightly out of focus. Maybe it hunted a little bit, maybe it went to the background before coming back to the subject. And these little things can sometimes ruin the efficiency of a shoot. Another issue is if you're trying to place objects between the camera and the subject, such as trees or branches or buildings or anything like that, you're trying to get a creative shot where you're trying to shoot through some, foreground. Sometimes the camera will hunt backwards and forwards between the objects, and that's not necessarily something that you always want. So no matter what camera I'm using or what autofocus mode, which settings and all that kind of stuff, I've always found myself coming back to manual focus just because of its reliability. So being limited to manual focus isn't so bad after all, but you need to be more creative and think a little bit differently about how you're going to shoot each particular shot. And over the years I've been able to develop a couple of different techniques that I use to get really beautiful and creative looking shots while only being limited to manual focus. So I'm going to share 3 of those with you guys today. So I have plenty of examples of these shots that I've done in the past, but I wanted to get out and film more of a behind the scenes of how I actually did it. So I brought my good friend Sam along and we demoed some of these shots for you guys. So the first shot is my most commonly used technique when shooting with a gimbal, and it's kind of like a rule of thumb when you're shooting with manual focus, and that is to keep the camera the same distance from your subject throughout the entire shot. So in this first shot, you can see that Sam is walking towards me and I'm walking backwards, and I'm being very, very careful to keep that same distance between myself and Sam throughout the shot. And you can see that I'm using the LCD screen as well as kind of visually gauging how far away I am from Sam, and I'll simply speed up or slow down to kind of keep him in focus throughout the shot. In addition to that, if you're going to try this shot and you are walking backwards like me, make sure you do check behind you every couple of seconds just to make sure you're not going to run into somebody or something. There are a couple of different variations on this shot you can use as well, where you might be tracking a circle around your subject or moving alongside your subject, maybe filming your subject's feet. And I love this kind of shot because it kind of gives you this progression of the character, like you're moving through the story with them. So the second shot is a push in, and how I achieve this shot is I actually find my end frame, so where I want to end up. So I'll put the camera in that position where I want to end the shot, and I'll get my focus, so I'll get tack sharp focus at that point, and then I'll bring the Glidecam back, and then I'll repeat the move sliding in towards the subject. And you can see here what I've done with Sam is I've just placed him next to this wall, found a nice little reflection here, and I'm moving in, and as I'm moving the Glidecam, I'm coming into focus. So you can really start getting creative with this kind of shot, really using the camera's movement to dictate the focus. You can be shooting a person or an inanimate object, you can add a bit of circular or sideways movement, even a pan or tilt or something like that. You can actually use foreground objects such as like blades of grass or water. You can move past them, they'll be in focus for a time, and then where you end up in your final frame with your subject in focus is where the shot will end. So the third and final shot is actually a little bit different in that I actually am changing the distance between myself and the subject. And this is kind of a tip overall as well. If you want to have a little bit more buffer of your depth of field, I recommend stopping the lens down a couple of stops rather than shooting wide open like I've been doing throughout this entire video. So in this shot I'm moving towards Sam, and I've chosen a very small aperture in order to get a greater depth of field. And even though I'm moving towards him, he's staying in focus the entire time. I also recommend for these kinds of shots using a wide angle lens. Something wider than a 35mm equivalent works really well. In this situation, I've used a 23mm lens on a crop sensor body, which equates to around 35mm, and you can see now that I've stopped the lens down to around f11, I can get a really nice deep depth of field, and it won't really matter if I move small distances towards or away from my subject. This technique works really well for this kind of shot because I was really trying to show the viewer what Sam was looking at in front of him, and so that deep depth of field allows everything to be in focus so the viewer can experience exactly what Sam's seeing. So there you go guys, that's my 3 tips for shooting manual focus on a gimbal, as well as a little bit of my philosophy around why I don't use autofocus as much. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and got something out of it. If you did, make sure you leave a like down below, I really appreciate that. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe to my channel. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.